We are back, episode 2 of season 2. Not that we really do seasons, we just keep rolling on if and when the time presents itself. But Nick, welcome back for another episode of the Groove Pod.
Thank you, Lachlan, and great to be back. And go Seahawks!
Yes, yeah, your local team,
We just won the Super Bowl. Yeah, I jumped on the bandwagon.
and as an Aussie. Because I mean, obviously you're an Aussie, but you've been in America for quite a long time now.
Yes.
How into the NFL are you?
Not. I'm a. What's the term? Is it a bellwether fan?
Or is it fair weather fan?
Fair weather fan. I'm sorry, I'm a fair weather fan. Because I didn't grow up with American football, and frankly don't have an entirely, I don't have 100% grasp of all the rules and how it works. I sort of get pulled back in when the team is doing well and when they're having sort of exciting games, and they had a great season and they won the Super Bowl. So very, very exciting to be in Seattle at the moment with them winning the divisional and then the NFC championship and then winning the Super Bowl. Although it is really weird because everyone's like, we're world champions. And I'm like, well, you're the only country that plays the sport, so you're not really world. I mean, you are by default, but that feels a little...
Americans seem to love doing that.
Right.
Yeah. Because the NBA used to do that too. And I think somewhere they stopped when they started realizing that, once America probably wasn't dominating at the Olympics the way they once did. And they were like, oh, actually, these European teams are really good as well. We probably can't.
Well, the baseball is still the World Series, and I think America doesn't always come out on top when there is truly an international baseball.
Yeah,
but anyway,
that's a good point.
We're not here to talk about sport.
No, we're not here to talk about it. It's fun and interesting to just hear the perspective on it. But no, I agree. We're not here to talk about sport. We've got lots of other stuff to talk about today, I think.
We do, and I teased, I think, last episode my foray into some what do you call it? I dug out a bag of Zunes.
Yes,
I don't know if that's a sentence that's ever been uttered before, but I literally have 4, and they were in a bag with cables. I actually have one of, I think, maybe not every model, because they probably had lots of different sub releases and all that kind of stuff. But I have the 30 and the 16 and the 32 and the 4. They're all different form factors. Anyway, and all the cables and all the whatnot was it. And I found it in a box and dug it out, and I've been playing around with it and really enjoying it. I don't know if that's if we should go in that direction, because we have other fun things to talk about, which is namely you are in a new space and you're playing with room as well as speakers, and I'm stealing your thunder, so I'll stop talking now.
No. I think it's an interesting question, and I wonder. I think maybe we park the Zune episode, because I think Adam
we'll just tease it every episode. We'll say the word Zune and we'll tee it up, and then we'll go, no, let's talk about the next episode.
Yeah. I think Adam seemed quite interested in that one when he joined us as a guest last time.
Okay, we can wait for Adam.
I wonder if we bring Adam back in for a nostalgia episode. We'll talk about things like Zune, iPods,
mini disc.
Got to talk about mini disc if we're going nostalgia.
I've got my Discman right here, actually.
Yeah, because you've still got an original, like a proper Discman, haven't you? Was it, or is yours a Panasonic equivalent?
Oh no, it's a Sony Discman. It's a pretty high end one though. I wouldn't call it the original. It was very much sort of towards.
I mean, original in the sense that it was from the era of the Discman, and it's a Sony.
You're right, but I did have, I think, the original Discman,
like
before it even had the anti-skip technology and the 5 second, 10 second, 15 second buffers and all that kind of stuff. I had one. And I really wish I still had it, even just for posterity. But no, the Discman that I continue to have and that continue to work flawlessly is actually kind of a high end model, and it's very cool.
Nice. So yeah, we'll do a nostalgia episode with Adam sometime soon, so we can keep teasing it a few more times.
Lovely.
but let's talk, because I think this is a big topic that I think a lot of people are interested in based on what I see in the comments on my videos. And just as a point, we've got some emails that we're going to get to later on in this episode. Nick and I are going to try and get to some emails that you've sent through, and people have been very patient because we haven't responded as yet.
And some teletexts.
Some teletexts, yes, that's it. Remember the days? We'll save the teletext for our nostalgia episode.
Absolutely, yeah.
So a topic that's come up a lot in my videos, and that Nick and I were just talking about offline, is room treatment and how much do you need to put into the room versus into the gear in terms of time, effort, expense, etc. And how this came up is that, as Nick said, I've moved into a new studio space for the YouTube channel for Passion for Sound. And previously I did everything out of my office. It was essentially untreated. I had a couple of just sound absorbing panels, foam panels on a few of the walls, but beyond that, it was not treated. I didn't have bass traps. I didn't have diffusers. It was very basic. It was just enough to stop major echoes for the microphone. And even then, I had to do pretty close-up microphone work to make sure I didn't capture too much of the room. But I've now moved into what I'm referring to as a studio space. Technically, it's just a large open retail space. And it's both wonderful and really challenging straight off the bat, because the walls are all cinder block, or those concrete blocks. So like oversized bricks. To look at the side of them on the side profile, it just looks like an oversized brick wall. But it means it's all very hard, flat, reflective surfaces on the two long walls of the room. And then on one wall, one of the short walls of the room is windows, which generally are not great for sound. And then the other end is just plasterboard, which is not too bad. In some ways,
being sort of gyprock and what do we call it over here? We don't call it plasterboard. Anyway,
don't you? I wonder what it's called in America.
My gosh, my brain is melting.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called in America. It's basically the layer that either gets put over a stud wall if you want to obviously
drywall or sheetrock.
Okay.
That's all.
Cool.
I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Anyway,
and so that's not too bad, but it's still fairly reflective. It's just a flat blank surface, and so it's a really interesting room from the point of view that there's a lot of echo. And when I first moved in as well, there was a fake wooden floor. It's a solid concrete slab with a fake kind of engineered wood floor over the top. And so when we first went in there, the echo was horrendous. It was absolutely disgusting, both for music and also for vocal recording stuff that I do. And the first step we did was to put down carpet tiles, just to do the whole flooring and carpet tiles. The space is about 51 square meters, which in imperial goes to about 550 square feet.
Fahrenheit, yeah, Fahrenheit.
Yeah. So it's a big open space. There was lots of echo. It was really unpleasant originally, but the carpet went a long way to fixing that. And that's as far as I've gone at this stage, purely due to budget and time constraints. But this is where things have gotten really interesting, and what I wanted to share, it actually makes the room quite lively. I had a colleague of mine who's a very experienced and successful designer of amplifiers, preamplifiers, and actually speakers as well. The first thing when he walked into the room, he was like, wow, this sounds great in here. And that was just from us talking. And his comment really got me thinking, because I'd been trying to deaden the room. And his response was, no, this room sounds great already, because it had some liveliness to it.
And when you say liveliness, so that does that mean some sort of bounce, a little bit of echo?
Yeah, there's a little bit of echo. And I know that there are technical terms for what is echo and what is reverb, and I always forget what's what. So we may, as we always do on this podcast, we may stuff up the terms we're using here. But
well, yes, I certainly will.
Yeah, and I'm guaranteed to as well. But yeah, there's a little bit of echo. I think some people call it slap echo or slap reverb. I can't remember the term now. I know it involves slaps. And so like if you clap your hands or you click your fingers, you can definitely hear that sound rings on a little bit. And when I ran some tests with my speakers, there's about a 500 to 700 millisecond continuation of sound after the signal stops, which is a lot more than you would ever want in something like a recording studio or a mixing and mastering location. But from a listening point of view, for just like a living room enjoying music point of view, it's surprisingly enjoyable, and it's making me curious as I continue to explore. It's making me curious to see what I actually prefer and how that contrasts to what people say is correct.
And so just to clarify, so the only thing you did in the space was you put down carpet tiles, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
So did you listen to the room before the carpet tiles? Did you
Yes.
bring anything in?
Yep.
And then what was your sort of A/B test experience? How did it differ? How much did it differ?
The sound was just cleaner, I would say. So with the carpet tiles, and there's a few things we should unpack here. With the carpet tiles in place, the sound, you could hear more of the individual components of the sound better because there wasn't all of that sound bouncing around the room to muddy it all up. But one of the things that my understanding has been, and I'm still learning this process as we go. I've never done kind of proper room setup like this before. I'm aware of the concepts, but I've never tried to put them into practice and therefore learn through putting them into practice. The understanding that I have is that the reflections off your walls, off your floor and your ceiling are the worst. You don't want those if you can avoid them. But the reflections off the walls aren't so bad so long as they don't hit you too quickly. If there's some delay between, and you think about it like a big concert hall, because they're a large open space, you will get the sound that comes from, say, the orchestra, and it's going to bounce off the walls and then come back to the audience. But it can take quite a long time for that to happen. And so it just adds a nice sense of ambience to the sound rather than muddying up the sound.
That makes sense.
The problem is when you get the sounds that bounce off the floor and come up to your ears, or bounce off the ceiling and come down to your ears, that can mess things up a little bit. And so I think the carpet tiles, what it was really doing was just diffusing the sound that was going down to the floor first. And the roof is high enough that it doesn't seem to be causing any great effects. I'm going to explore potentially putting what they call some clouds in at some point, which are things that hang from the roof that diffuse the audio that does go up. But that's a long way down the track at this stage, I think.
So as you are talking and I'm listening to you, and maybe the listeners can hear it as well, I can hear lorikeets or parakeets in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I'm hearing you talk and I'm hearing those, I'm wondering, okay, how does the soundproofness or non-soundproofness of the space then play into that? Like you mentioned, there are some windows. Maybe you have a window open. It's probably quite hot right now. Is it? Is that what's going on? Or
yeah, I've got a big sliding door open here because it is a hot day here.
Got it. So how do you? Maybe this is not the right time to ask that question, but how do you think about then sound coming in from outside and not just sort of sound escaping out?
Yeah, I think that's a different challenge and a different question, whether or not it's an issue for you or not. For me, it's an issue more from recording than from listening to music. There's a train line that's over the road and back a little bit from the studio, and because it is a retail shop, essentially, there are people walking past. So every now and again, I'll be midway through recording a review, and I've just got to stop and wait while someone goes past on their phone having a good chat to their wife. And no. So every now and again, I just sit there going, "Come on, move on." But from a music listening point of view, that doesn't really affect the musical listening experience, other than maybe distracting you for half a second from it. However, that said, my approach to that with the windows, and this is both from a soundproofing point of view, but also from an internal acoustics point of view, is I'm going to put a big block-out curtain across the windows, because they're floor-to-ceiling windows, basically, that are 3.5 meters wide or thereabouts.
Is that pretty wide?
Yeah, it's. I'm just trying to think what it'd be equivalent to.
Is that about a garage door width? A car door width?
Yeah, it'd be just bigger than a single car garage door size.
Right.
Probably 1.5, maybe 1.5 single garage door kind of width.
That's pretty big.
It's a decent size, and the fact that it's floor to ceiling, there's a lot of glass there just to bounce the sound back. And so I've got a really heavy block out blind that would be up, except for the fact that it's going to be hard to mount it. So I'm thinking I'll have to get someone to come in and kind of help me. Someone that's a professional that's done it before.
Well, then, so I have a question about that. If I may jump in, or I want to make sure you finish your thought. But did you just buy a regular old block-out curtain, or did you get an actual acoustic curtain?
I looked into both, and a lot of this process, and so I'm trying to think the right order to share this. A lot of this process is being done on a budget. Right. And that's partly because I can't, like the channel can't afford to spend a lot of money on acoustics.
Yeah.
But it's
also like and subscribe.
Yeah, that's right. Please, passion for sound on YouTube. So part of it is that I just can't afford to spend a lot of money on acoustics. The other thing is when I thought about it, I thought, well, I've got a few ways I could do this. I could wait and do it, in inverted commas, right, and do proper acoustic curtains, and I could spend a fortune on acoustic treatment, or I could look at it as if I'm an average person who's trying to work out where do I spend my money between the gear and the sound treatment and find the best pathway to do a good job of the sound treatment without going crazy on price. And that's where I've landed, partly by necessity, of course, but I thought, I think it'll be more relevant and applicable and fun for people to see what is actually achievable for the average person rather than what you can do if your budget's unlimited, because mine absolutely isn't. And so the blockout curtain is very much a standard normal curtain. I grabbed it from is it China? Is a local company? No, it's a local company that had a massive Black Friday sale. I'm pretty sure they're sourcing the curtains from a Chinese, like, AliExpress type place, but they had a system that was set up where I could clearly outline, here's what I need, drop length, width, curtain rod design, etc. And so I think that was sort of where I was thinking this is a really achievable way to do it. I think I spent, I might be getting this wrong, it was no more than $2,000 on curtains. It might have been about $2,000 on curtains. It might have been a little bit less. But if I'd gone down the acoustic route for that same size curtain, it would have easily been double or maybe 4 times that.
So this is where I actually have a little bit of experience, because when we when the whole COVID lockdown stuff happened, I we all had to work from home. I was I think we may have only just recently started, but I was hosting a podcast for work, and because everyone was home, kids are at home doing homeschool. Everyone's home. It's obviously very loud. I had to try and create a little sort of recording space at home, and I found there's more than one, but I found some acoustic blankets on Amazon that I bought a bunch of, and I was very, very impressed with them. The ones that I got are, I don't really know I don't sort of technically know how to describe the material. I can tell you they were very heavy. They were, I've got the inches dimensions. I don't have that in metric, I'm sorry, but 96 inches by 48. And that was $90 or $93 for one panel. And I think I got 4 or 6 panels, and they have eyelets. And so I basically created almost like a shower curtain sort of set of rings on a track, and then hooked these sort of blankets around that on a track, and then basically created sort of a big oval. And I, they were not attractive. Well, they were okay, but like they certainly weren't designed to be good looking visually. They were designed to block sound, and they actually did a fantastic job. I don't know though if when I say acoustic blanket and the thing that I'm talking about is different perhaps to what you're referring to, and I'm sure there are many different grades of quality and sound absorption. But yeah, I'm cognizant of this me sounding like, well, I can find acoustic blankets for $93. That's not what I'm saying.
It didn't go across that way.
But I'm wondering if the kind of thing that I found, if that would be a stepping stone. You're starting with a blockout blind or blockout curtain, and then maybe you could look at one of these, or it wouldn't be one, it would be several, as a sort of a next step before potentially going and investing in, true audiophile quality, acoustic dampening cloth or something.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I don't yet have an answer as to how this curtain's going to perform because it's not up yet. But what I noticed as I looked around was that the acoustic curtains are often a multi-layered design, was what I gathered. And this is the other thing: acoustic curtains could actually be different from those acoustic sheets that you bought, the acoustic blankets that you bought. I don't know the makeup of the acoustic blankets. Actually, how thick are they? Are they quite thick?
Well, they were a synthetic. I'll read it. It says durable, made of proprietary sound absorption material, Eco C-Tex, which is more eco-friendly, blah, 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 compared to traditional acoustic fiberglass or foam panels, reduces echo, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. It just says non-toxic, non-carcinogenic. I'm looking for more information on it.
So you've just sent me the link, and I can see there that I believe these might be a multi-layered design of some sort, but I also think they're probably not going to be any better than the blockout curtain I've bought. And the reason I say that, again, this is not to sound well, you found acoustic blankets, but mine's better. No, I think that they're different tools for different purposes, in the sense that those acoustic blankets will be really helpful for somebody that wants to be able to just go and hang something on a wall to deal with the sound. The problem I struck, and I share this because it's going to be that what you've just talked about is going to be great for some people if you say setting up a small basement room and you just want to take some of the reflectiveness out of the walls.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Blankets will be perfect. For what I needed, I couldn't find acoustic blankets that were going to cover the space that I needed to with those windows. I would have ended up with a hodgepodge, what's the word, like patchwork of blankets covering the windows, and it would have looked really shabby. And so what I've ended up going for, which I think is going to be a better solution for what I need, it's a blockout curtain, but it's also, I think, was referred to as a thermal blockout curtain. And so what it means is you've got a fabric layer on the front, and then inside of it they also put a plastic layer which helps with insulation, and then there's another fabric layer on the back. And so my theory in that, from the research I've done on a bit of acoustics, is that by having the multiple layers, you're getting multiple layers to both protect, absorb, and diffract or refract. I'm not sure what the right word is there, but diffuse the sound, if you like. And so, yeah, I think both will be doing similar jobs, but the curtain allowed me to cover a much larger space attractively, and also I can just slide it in and out of the window as I need to, so I don't have to permanently.
Fine, you're right, and my suggestion was dumb.
Not if somebody had a basement space that they need to go, I've got a room that I'm just dedicated to listening. It might be easier just to hang up some of those curtains or the blankets.
Absolutely, and I think actually my takeaway here is more that when I started the process, I thought, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford acoustic blankets or acoustic panel, acoustic curtains. They're the limited understanding I had of that as a product was like, yeah, they're going to be $5,000, $10,000, like they're ultimately very, very expensive, and I'm sure they are for the highest quality, product. But I was very pleasantly surprised that at an entry level of, let's call it $100 a panel, and I think I got four actually. Was really quite impressed with what they could do. And so if you're just looking to cover a window or a particularly reflective surface, maybe they're a good option.
Yeah, definitely.
Now I want to ask you about bass traps, because I maybe that's not the right next question, but certainly for me, I wondered if can they be used as bass traps, or is a bass trap a very specific, from both from a material and a structural perspective, a very, very specific thing?
Yeah, bass traps are very specific because bass wavelengths are very long, and so there's no amount of no design of a blanket or a curtain in that case, like what I'm using, that's going to deal with bass, because they're too narrow. So for most bass traps, if you look up bass traps online, whether they're the corner bass traps, or you can also get bass traps that are kind of panels that you can put in a room somewhere, they're all thick, they're all deep. And that's because you need a certain amount of depth to absorb the bass frequencies, because they're such a long wavelength. They'll just essentially pass around anything that's too narrow. And so my current plan for bass traps, and again, this is my first step in the journey that may not be sufficient. It may not do a particularly good job, but I'm going to give it a try because it's the cheapest way I can do it at the moment, is to make up some DIY bass traps where essentially what you do...
egg cartons.
What's that? No,
Just egg cartons.
egg
Just
cartons also
egg
will do
cartons and
nothing for
super glue.
bass. Great for diffusion of sound, horrendous for bass, or just irrelevant for bass.
How about ostrich egg cartons? Emu egg cartons?
No, still not. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The dinosaur egg cartons we might be getting
Yes, there you
somewhere.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So the thing that I'm conscious of is that there are also the questions around how much do you need bass traps, and that's going to depend a lot on the room and also the placement of your speakers as well. And also whether you're sitting in a consistent listening spot or not, because if you're sitting in a consistent listening spot, you can often kind of tune that spot based on where you put your speakers and or your subwoofers, or subwoofer if it's singular, so that the sound is just right in your sweet spot. But maybe when you walk outside of that sweet spot, the bass drops away or the bass overblows or whatever it might be. But I think the key thing for me and what I'm trying to do with my bass traps is to have something that I can actually move and position appropriately for the room once I understand the room better. And so there's a bit of a pro tip in here, which is if you keep your eyes on things like Facebook Marketplace and local community marketplaces, you can pick up some pretty good stuff. And Lisa, my wife, who obviously, Nick, you know that, but for those that don't know my family like you do, so Lisa was on Facebook Marketplace and found a nearby location that was getting rid of a whole lot of what they call acoustic insulation, which is much like normal insulation, much like, the bats that go into your walls, those layers of whether it's rock wool or similar type foam and fiber bats. But this stuff is designed specifically for acoustics, for sound, meaning that it's probably not going to do such a great job as a heat insulation or cooling insulation. But it was free, and it all came out of a local place that had been set up. It was a rental property that they'd set up as a rehearsal and recording studio for a band, and they were repurposing it to release it, and they had all this stuff to get rid of. So I went and picked it all up, and I've got a room that is probably like a 2 by 2 meter room. It's just a very small room in the studio. It's 2 by 2, and I reckon the pile goes at least 2 meters high, full of these long
of
rolls.
Asbestos. Oh,
no,
sorry.
Thank God it's not asbestos. Full of these long rolls of this acoustic insulation. And another little tip here is the acoustic insulation is also, in my mind, preferable because you don't need to worry about handling it with gloves and stuff like that. It's not fibrous in the way stuff like rock wool is.
Yeah.
With rock wool, you need to be careful that you don't breathe it in. You don't get it too much on your arms. It can be quite irritating. Apparently, I've avoided it for that reason. And so, yeah, so my plan is to buy, and you could make your own. I just don't have the time for this. I'm going to buy some IKEA bookshelves, and I found this hack online. It's not my original idea. I'm going to buy these IKEA bookshelves. It's the cheapest bookshelf you can get from IKEA. It's about, I think from memory, they're in the range of 70 Australian dollars, I should say. So they're probably $50 US.
This be a Billy bookshelf?
What's that?
This is a Billy?
It's not a Billy. I can't remember the name of it. But it's a simple bookshelf. It's about probably 2.5 feet. I'm not good with my feet in that sort of. I'm good with my feet when it's around 5 to 6 to 7 feet. I'm not good with it when it's smaller. It's wide enough.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's wide enough that you can wrap your arms around it comfortably, and so if you want to move it, you can kind of.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
You can pick it up and move it around.
Oh God!
Everything's gonna have a joke in it now. And so the idea is you buy this bookshelf and you put it together, but you leave out almost all the shelves. You probably just get the middle shelf in for sort of structural stability, and then you can pack it with this acoustic insulation or whatever insulation you get, and then wrap some sort of nice looking fabric around the front, staple it on the back, and then put the back on the cabinet. And for probably, depending on how much you have to spend on the fabric and on the insulation that goes inside, you've got yourself a bass trap that's probably going to come out for $100 US, maybe a little bit more.
Is it going to look like crap though?
No, well, that's what the fabric's for. So if you choose a nice looking fabric, and so the idea is you wrap it around and you carefully staple it so it's nice and tight and taut at the front. and then the back of it, obviously the back of it might look a little bit shabby because you've got the stapled fabric. But the
I
idea
want to
is
see a
that,
picture of this because in my head, this looks like. I'm not trying to completely
no,
yuck your yum here. It's just that I'm looking at the IKEA website now and I'm trying to think of, okay, so I make this, I don't put any of the shelves in, I put all the acoustic what's the correct taxonomy? What is it? Acoustic
acoustic
shielding? No,
insulation.
insulation in there, and
Yep.
then I'm going to wrap it in a fabric. And I'm like, well, no, okay, all right, I
So
guess you could. What
all
if
you're
you did
going
like a
to
Tolex or
see,
something, so it looked like a giant speaker?
well, yeah, I mean, all you're going to see is whatever fabric you've chosen. So you could make it
That's
a
true.
patterned
Okay,
fabric, you could make it a textured fabric. I'm probably just going to
all right, I
choose
stand
a
down.
subtle texture. And so you're just going to see a great big box that's about, I don't know, 6 foot something tall, and whatever that width is that you can get your arms around easily. It's just going to be a thing that stands there covered in fabric. So the
Okay.
idea is that you either make a feature of it or you have it disappear into the background.
Oh,
Potentially,
if the fabric was the same color as your walls
you
too,
will,
it could
exactly. Yeah,
potentially disappear.
yeah.
No, that's a great idea. All right, I withdraw my objection.
Okay, cool. The other thing I just realized, I hadn't thought of this, is if you were clever, you could maybe even hang artwork over the front of it. And because the artwork doesn't really matter, the base wavelengths are long enough to just pass straight beyond the artwork. So maybe that's what I'll do, is set some up to put posters and artwork on the front, and so it'll look like a movable art installation. I don't know, we'll see. But the point is, you can create a bass trap for not too much money, and then they're deep enough to actually have some impact on absorbing the bass. So that's my plan at the moment. Again, I haven't done it yet, but I can't see why it wouldn't work as a poor man's bass trap without spending a fortune on it. I don't yet know about corner bass traps. I may or may not do some corner bass traps. Again, it depends on the room. But I'm also finding that, and this was probably my big thing I want to talk about today, the placement of the speakers has had more impact than anything else so far. Just getting the speakers in the right spot changed the entire sound of the room, if you're going to sit in the same spot every time. If you want to put speakers in a room, wherever you want to put them in the room, and have them just sound good wherever you are in the room, that's probably a different story. But if you've got your sweet spot that you know you're always listening in, and if you've got some flexibility as to where you choose to put that sweet spot, then the room itself can be kind of taken out of the equation to a degree, was my experience.
So this is then a callback in some ways to, I think it was the last episode that we filmed, where I asked, are there any avenues, any areas, any topics, any domains in audio that have, where there is sort of an objective answer? Because what I want to ask you now is, and I'm sure these exist, but I wonder how much you've dug into them and what you know about them. Are there room sort of modeling or planning software, or even just sort of like back of napkin algorithms that allow you to sort of somewhat objectively identify you put in the dimensions of your room and perhaps maybe some of the large pieces of furniture that are going to have an impact, and then you ask the software, where do I put my speakers?
Yeah, and the answer to that is, this is where I turn to our AI overlords, and I just took it to Google Gemini and had a chat to Gemini, and what the aim of it is. So I already understood the aim of it. What I did was get Gemini to do the heavy lifting of the maths and the thinking. The idea with your placement of your speakers in your room, if you're going, so let's start at the extreme. If you have your speakers right against the wall, then what's going to happen is that the bass is going to come off the speaker. It's going to bounce off the back wall. It's going to add to the bass coming off the speaker itself, and you're going to get boomy, bloated bass. Or if it's a small speaker, it's actually going to help the bass from those speakers to sound more full. So depending on the speaker you have, you may actually want to put your speakers against the wall. And I know a lot of people say you should never put your speakers against the wall, bring them out from the wall, and there is an argument for that and a reason for that.
Those people are fools.
Well, no, it depends.
No, they're not.
In studios, though, that's actually really common practice. So in studios,
do you mean, when you say studios, you mean recording studios, or do you mean like just small spaces?
Small studio monitors. They will put them against the wall. And the reason
intentionally,
for that,
because they literally have space constraints and they just have to.
I believe it's intentional, because
interesting.
often they're using small studio monitors. They haven't
Yep.
got space for gigantic speakers. And by putting them against the wall, you're getting what's called boundary reinforcement, which is what I just spoke about, where that,
Right.
because the boundary of the room is right next to the speaker, the bass reflection off that wall is close enough to being in time with the bass coming off the front, and so it reinforces the bass. Whereas what happens if you bring the speakers a little way forward of the wall, let's say you bring it 50, 60, 70 centimeters forward, that actually now creates a time delay where the bass coming off the speaker bounces off the wall and comes back to you out of phase with the bass coming off the speaker. And so then if you measure it, what you see is that the bass kind of comes up and then it has this huge dip where it gets cancelled out by that reflection, and then it comes back up again. And so you end up with bass that's got a big suck out in the middle of it because the reflection.
And you don't want that, right? Like,
No,
I mean,
definitely not.
there's no scenario where you would want that, is there?
Definitely not.
I mean,
and it can be like, really hard to fix.
But just to stick with that question for a second, is there a scenario where you'd want that? Like, what if you had, I don't know, what if you had what if the resonant frequency of your room was something very, very unique and strange? Or what if you had two subwoofers of different sizes, and you're like, is there? I think I'm sure the answer is no, but like, are there going to be like really nuanced little scenarios like that where you might want it?
Oh, maybe if you could be clever enough to work out, like, let's say your room happens to have, and I'm just going to make up numbers here. Let's say your room happens to have a 60 hertz resonant frequency, and so whatever sound you put into it gets boosted at 60 hertz. You might, if you can be clever enough to do it, you might want to try to position the speakers so that cancellation happens to happen at exactly 60 hertz and suck some of that energy back out of the room. But it's either going to be massive trial and error or way more complicated calculations and positioning than I'm able to think about. I think it's more a case that sometimes you have no choice. You know, sometimes you can't put your speakers where you want to put the speakers because it's a room that gets used for other things. And so then it's more a case of being aware that, okay, this is happening, how do I fix it? Which is then when having a sub, being able to place the sub appropriately and maybe then use an EQ on the sub might allow you to overcome that. But no, I don't really see there being, other than that one really obscure example of the resonant frequency, I don't see any times that you'd want, based on my limited experience and thinking it through, I can't see any situations where you'd want that. But the thing that, just in case this kind of was unclear and it sounded like you're always going to have that problem if you pull the speakers out from the wall, that's only if you don't pull the speakers out from the wall far enough. And this is where things get interesting. So you've got, in my opinion, you've got two choices with speakers if you want to optimize their sound. You either have them right against the wall and then you get that extra bass reinforcement, or you have to pull them so far out from the wall that by the time that reflection off the back wall comes back, it's not cancelling out the bass. It's still going to some degree reinforce it. But if you're going far enough away, your brain will hear it as part of the reverb and echo of the room, not part of the original sonic signal coming off the speaker. And it's all about the timing of it.
Yeah, when I think of reverb or echo, whichever one the correct term is here, and bass, to me those are sort of almost counterintuitive concepts. Like when I think of adding echo or reverb to music, whether it's music that I'm playing on an instrument or you know, some sort of digital sound processing effect thing, obviously it's being applied across the entire spectrum. But I don't for some reason, I don't know, maybe this is a very silly thing to say, but I don't really think of bass as a frequency that you ever would want to add reverb or echo to. Is that a silly thing to say?
I mean,
I guess what I'm trying to say is, would I notice sort of would that be a very obvious and sort of strange or even sort of confusing thing to hear versus when you hear it perhaps in higher frequencies? Or do you think I'm going down a rabbit hole it's not worth exploring?
Yeah, and I'm trying to wrap my brains for there is a,
because hypothetically, if you've got a subwoofer and you've placed the subwoofer in your room in such a way that it is creating this forgive me, what's taxonomy here? What are we saying?
The boundary reinforcement stuff.
This boundary reinforcement.
Yep.
To the point where you're hearing the bass frequencies with, and maybe not the other frequencies because they're coming through different speakers in different placement. If you're hearing just the bass frequencies with this boundary reinforcement, with this sort of echo / delay, I don't know which one it is that weird?
Yeah, so the boundary reinforcement won't be an issue because that's happening in time with the main signal because it's right against the wall. So your reflection in our brains, the reflection gets merged with the original signal as being one thing because they happen close enough together. Okay. When you bring the sub a little bit further from the wall so that the brain hears that's the sound of the sub and then, oh, that's the reflection, that's when it might get a bit different. But now that you mention it, and this is an area I haven't yet looked into because I haven't even tried to set my subwoofers up in the studio yet. When you go to the step with subs or bass in general, the echoes are less prominent. You don't hear it in the same way that you hear higher frequencies. And from memory, that is actually the difference between an echo and reverb. From memory, it's to do with where the frequencies are, but I can't remember the details.
Someone correct us in the comments or on email. Yeah, what's our email address?
askthegroovepod@gmail.com.
Lovely.
And on that note, should we pause here and quickly answer some emails?
Let's do it.
All right.
That sounds like a good place.
So let me just bring up the emails here. And some of these go back a long, long time. Back to when I did. So we've got September 2025 and we're recording this.
Holy moly.
11th of February 2026. So we've got Peter has emailed and said, "Hi guys, I just listened to the podcast about audio vitriol and couldn't help but agree with everything you said. In the past, I have mildly upsetting experiences with posting on forums, not just audio. So I now very rarely dive into forums, which is a shame. That's my comment. And if I do, I avoid responding to any posts that are or get confrontational. I especially agree with the discussion you had about upgrading, or rather not necessarily upgrading and enjoying the equipment you have. Constantly seeking improvement usually adds to unhappiness, or leads to unhappiness, I should say. And people who are always seeking improvement are often perhaps in it for the equipment rather than the enjoyment of the music. Keep it going." Any thoughts, Nick?
Well, first of all, sincere apologies for taking so long to respond to the email and acknowledge the email, and thank you very much for sending that in and for continuing on that part of the conversation. Yes, I relate to all of that. I don't. It's been a long time since I considered weighing in online forums with my sort of opinion on anything that would be classified as perhaps a review or an endorsement or a recommendation against. Partly because of exactly what. Sorry, who was that email from? Yeah, from what Peter said. And I think it's a shame. I think it's disappointing that we find ourselves in that place. But yeah, it's been. I just have sort of written that off for myself. So I'm going to think about that and maybe think about how I revisit it. But yeah, enjoy the gear that you have, and love. I was going to say, I can't. I'm struggling to remember who told me this, but a friend. I might need to cut this out. I think a friend who has some sort of disease, but a manageable disease. I can't remember what it was. And I remember they once said something like, you have to learn to love your disease. And so you have to sort of like, maybe it doesn't apply here, but it's sort of like, become, yeah. I want to defend that statement because I actually do really like that statement, even though it sort of sounds like it's pessimistic. But it's like you have a thing, or you have things. They came to you in whatever way it was. Maybe they were a gift, or maybe they were just they were as a result of the circumstances that you were in at the time, your budget, whatever it was. But you have it. It's a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and so whatever the phrase is. And so, yeah, like understand it and become an expert in it, and then learn to love it and understand its idiosyncrasies and work with them and work around them. And I think I like that. I really like that. I've significantly rephrased what Peter said, but I do really like that sentiment.
I agree. I think it's, whilst it's fun to try new gear and the discoveries that can bring, where you get to hear music in different ways, I think it's very easy to lose sight of the musical enjoyment by getting stuck hunting for that next hit, so to speak.
Yeah, well, and as you're talking about speaker placement, I'm now thinking like, oh my gosh, I want to go and move my speakers around in the room in different places and see how I can find, different ways of hearing it.
And that's the other thing,
I think
there's other ways to get that same hit without having to buy new gear. It can be move your speakers. It could be, there's one thing I love doing is sitting too close to your speakers. So you almost get like a headphone effect out of the speakers, and it creates really interesting staging stuff that can be really fun and engaging as well. There's so many things you can do to get that hit without having to buy new gear.
to get that hit.
Going from a great pair of whatever, or great DAC, headphone amplifier, whatever, use a cheaper one or a different one. It might be going from solid state to tube, and then do that for a couple of weeks and then go back the other direction. And each time it sounds and feels new because your brain's gotten used to the other one. And so I think that can be really fun.
That's great.
Moving on, we've also got an email from Brett who raised the fact that when we've talked turntables in the past, and I think we'll have to probably save unpacking this one to a different conversation on a different day. He raised the fact that we've never talked about RIAA EQ.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that, Nick?
A little bit. That's the Record Industry Association of America, and the EQ profile that they essentially, I don't know if they force it, but it's sort of like
the standard.
a standard, but it's sort of like a silent standard that you sort of don't get a lot of control over, as I understand.
Yeah, my understanding of it, and again, I've not looked into it in depth either, but my understanding is that in order for the auditory content to fit onto the record effectively, they have to reduce the amount of bass in the recording, in the mixing of it.
Right.
And then you need your preamplifier to then boost back the appropriate amount afterwards. And that's why there needs to be a standard, so that if, I'm just going to make up numbers here. If the standard thing is there's let's say a negative 20 decibel, and I'm making this up, a negative 20 decibel cut from everything below 200 hertz, you need your preamplifier to make a positive 20 dB boost for everything below 20 kilohertz.
In order to get back to essentially, baseline neutral of how it was, master, how it was recorded.
The challenge, I think, is that different preamps will do that better and worse than others, and that's where things can get tricky. And that's why I think it's probably a good conversation for another time, when we have probably a whole episode to talk about the difference between preamp A and preamp B, for instance, and how much that comes into the quality of the RIAA EQ application within it, as an example.
And I think the other question that I have, and I remember reading about this a little bit, is whether there were competing standards, or whether there were other ways of EQing the mastered track for it being pressed onto vinyl, that you need to be aware of. So that when you are playing that record and you are, setting up your equipment, you're obviously, getting the best quality and the most accurate reproduction of the sound. So that's a good one. We should definitely come back to that.
Definitely. One little note just to plant as a seed was that something else Brett said was that when he's seen phono preamp reviews that have got measurements, he said that they always are, plus or minus 0.1 dB from what they should be in terms of the EQ curve. What I think is going to be interesting, though, is that there's going to be components used within that preamp to do the EQ process, whether it's old school components using, I'm guessing, capacitors, resistors, etc., or whether it's going to be using some sort of op-amp system to do it. That's probably going to change the sound quality significantly. So that's an interesting one for us to dive into in a lot more depth at some point. So Brett, we will, and thank you for your email.
Do we have a Word doc, a Google doc
we should
with all these topics on it? I think we need to start.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's do that, and then we can come back and revisit it.
Or let's say that we're going to do it, not do it, and then next episode we'll go through exactly the same topics.
We got two more emails, well, technically three, but two of them are from the same person. So Jerry wrote in and has said that
thank you, Brett,
we were asking if people listen to vinyl on headphones. So basically, Jerry's confirming that that he is indeed somebody that listens to vinyl / turntables on headphones, which, based on my time in Kuala Lumpur, where I went to that great little cafe called Eternal Vinyl, and sat down and listened to a couple of LPs on headphones whilst I enjoyed some snacks and a drink. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to vinyl on headphones. I thought it was a really nice way to do it. Very laid back, easygoing, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's good to know that other people are doing that as well. Jerry's got a second email as well, where he's shared some information about the different types of, we were talking about belt drive and direct drive turntables previously, and what his view of it is that the replacement of belts would be far easier than what you may have if it's a direct drive system and it's all kind of embedded and it needs any kind of servicing in time. So that's an interesting point, that potentially the belt drives might be, because the belt's the bit doing all the friction-based work and it's exposed and easy to change, that it actually might be a better choice than having the friction-based stuff inside the mechanism, as it were, for direct drive. So it's an interesting take on that. So again, Jerry, thank you for your inputs. There's a little bit more there that I'll let Nick read offline so that we don't drag out this episode too much, but thank you for your email, Jerry. And finally, we have one more that was actually sent to a different email address. So Nick, you wouldn't have seen it until I forwarded it from my normal email address for the channel. So the last email is from Sam. And Sam says that he actually buys vinyl for his dad. His dad's now 72. And so Sam has now started buying the vinyl for his dad, because it's harder, obviously, for his dad to get out and do it. And this is to do with the vinyl weights, I think, because he's saying that his dad often remarks at how thick and heavy the new vinyl is, and that when Sam was upgrading or restoring an older turntable, it's a dual CS 607 ULM turntable, and apparently the ULM stands for ultra low mass. And according to Sam, those became popular as vinyl got noticeably thinner during the 1907's oil crisis. I think it should be 1970s oil crisis. That the vinyl got
probably
thinner.
two.
There may be, yeah. Vinyl got thinner because it became too expensive during the crisis. We were speaking about that on one of those episodes. And so obviously that's why the ultra low mass turntable was created, was to handle that very low weight vinyl. And so, yeah, Sam was just saying that he thinks it's a really interesting time in music history, which I agree with, that he's loving the content, and his father-in-law is sending him a Parasound NC2000 INT, which I don't actually know what that one is, but by the sound
what
of it,
is it? I'm going to type it in right now. Say it again. Parasound?
Parasound NC2000 INT. I'm wondering if it's a turntable, perhaps, or is it an integrated amp with the INT? We'll see.
It is an integrated amplifier.
Lovely.
Oh,
actually, I have heard of Parasound now that we mention it. So that's exciting that you're getting a bonus to play with there, Sam. I hope you're loving it. You probably well and truly got it and have been loving it for months, given how long it took us to get this email.
And to Sam and Sam's dad, and to everyone listening, please share some recommendations for just great vinyl finds. I think that's the other thing that I'm learning, is that, I say I'm learning, I'm constantly learning, but there are albums and there are lots of releases that just sound fantastic on vinyl, and just different and unique to perhaps the digital version, or this or even just remasterings or repressings or stuff that just sound great and unique. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a entirely subjective quality based assessment. Just really unique, really different, and worth checking out.
Cool. No, I love that idea. So for anyone that's not already aware of it, it's askthegroovepod@gmail.com. And I would love to see and hear that as well. I went out and bought, I don't know if we talked about it, I bought a bunch of vinyl recently in preparation for a review that never ended up happening because the turntable they sent me was a prototype and it had problems with it. So they said, don't do anything with it, because I plugged it in and there was hum, and I didn't know if it was the preamp they sent with it or the turntable. I won't name names because it was a pre-production prototype, and I don't want to put anyone off this particular brand or product because
Will they follow up with a working one later on?
I believe so. I certainly hope so. I'll be very
That would
upset
be
if they
lovely.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, with the new studio space, I've now got space to actually have a turntable system. It won't get used a lot because I still just prefer the
Because you're a
convenience.
snob.
I am. I just prefer the convenience of streaming still. But I would love for those occasions where I just want to enjoy a particular album or just to test, a set of speakers or an amplifier with vinyl. I do actually want to get that set up now. So in my future, it will be a nice. I'm actually going to an Audio Technica event next week, so I might actually try to hit up Audio Technica for a turntable review or 2 or 3. We'll see if they'll let me do a few of theirs, and then maybe
feel free to make fun of me in that I bought a new stylus for my bought a new cartridge, excuse me, for my turntable before realizing that it doesn't actually have a replaceable cartridge. So
oops, I not. I thought it had a replaceable cartridge, but you accidentally bought the same one or something.
It has a replaceable stylus,
but
the stylus it isn't really an upgrade. Like,
yes,
it's more just like, if you drop your vinyl record player and the stylus falls out and you accidentally step on it, like, you can put a new one in there.
Yeah.
But there's no way to actually, there's no upgradable options.
Gotcha.
And the cartridge I bought, which is sitting right here,
can do nothing.
Well, not until I finally get off my butt and get a new compatible player. Anyway.
Yeah. So ask the Groove Pod at Gmail. Ask the Groove Pod at gmail.com. Any recommendations of great vinyl that just sounds fantastic would be wonderful and welcomed by both of us. But for now, we should wrap this one up soon. But let's quickly come back to the conversation around the room stuff. I want to mention one other thing that I discovered. And then I'd love to also quickly talk new music with you before we wrap up this episode, Nick.
Yes, please.
So the thing I really was excited to share was the difference it made once I got Gemini to do that heavy lifting of working out where in my room I should place them. And to help people out, all I did was I said to Gemini, and you could do this with ChatGPT, Gemini, I don't know about Siri, but pretty much any of the AIs you could probably do this with. I just said to it, here are the dimensions of my room. I said, I'm working in a room where the longest wall is this, the shortest wall is this. The studio I'm in is a bit of a funny shape because if you imagine it's one large rectangular room and then there's another section off one side of it where it's open and then the other half of that section is closed. So it's kind of, if you were to look at it from above, it would be like a P-shaped room where the top of the P is much bigger than the stem of the P, if that makes sense. Or a B-shaped room.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
So I just asked ChatGPT or Gemini to think about it as if it was a rectangular room, and I ignored the extra little add-on bit. And I just said, here's the dimensions of the room. It's this by this. Where should I put my speakers? And I told it that I wanted the speakers to be halfway along, so in the dead center of the long wall of the room, which for me just made more sense from a usability point of view. Acoustically, it may not be the best choice, but usability, it works. And so I said, I'm putting the speakers in the middle of this wall, but how far out from the wall should they be based on these dimensions? And Gemini went through and it told me the reasoning for it, and which I understood, but as I said before, I didn't want to do the heavy lifting of thinking about it. What it's doing is it's trying to work out what's the sweet spot to cancel out as many of the possible standing waves as you can. You're never going to get rid of all of them, but which one's going to be the best? And I think from memory, it was about 1/5 of the way across. No, it couldn't have been 1/5. That would have been closer to the wall than that. Whatever it was, it worked it out, and it was some kind of fraction of the distance. And so I moved the speakers to that location, having tried them, as I said before, right against the wall and about 60 to 70 centimeters away from the wall. When I brought them to the correct spot, they measured almost identically to how they had when they were against the wall, probably just a little bit less bass. In other words, there was none of that dip in the bass that I'd had when they were kind of out from the wall, but not far enough out from the wall. But more importantly, the imaging and the focus of the sound was just remarkable, spectacular. And I've tried 3 different speakers in exactly that same spot. We've got a compact ported speaker, a compact sealed speaker, and a larger ported speaker, and they all sounded just a million times better once I put them in the right spot.
That is fascinating. So the placement of the speaker, the place, the coordinates of where the speaker goes in the room were the same for 3 different types of speakers of different sizes.
I didn't check if they should be or not. I just tried
Oh, I see.
once I put the speakers in, like the speaker stands in that position, I just tried 3 different speakers on those speaker stands in that position, and each of the speakers sounded magnificent in that spot. Which theoretically, my understanding, and again, those that have dived into this deeper, email us at askthegroovepod@gmail.com. My understanding of it is that because the positioning is about the frequencies in the room, it's speaker agnostic. It's room relevant, not speaker relevant. So that's my understanding. And to me, the proof was in the pudding. Each of the speakers sounded absolutely amazing in that spot.
And did your little AI friend tell you that this distance, was it a ratio for the room size?
Correct. It was a
so
ratio.
So in theory, whatever that ratio is could apply to any room that is of a similar shape.
I believe so. I believe so. Give me 2 seconds, and I will try and bring up my question.
And then I'd love to read the comment that I found on Reddit that is sort of in support of this conversation.
Please do.
Do you want me to do that while you're looking that up?
Yes. Okay. So I've actually got the answer now, anyway. So then we'll come back to what you read.
What's the answer?
So this is quoting from Gemini. Finding the perfect speaker placement is part science and part art. But since you
no, you got to start. It'll say, what a thoughtful question.
It actually didn't. It didn't do that.
What an insightful and amazing person you are.
So
it sounds like you're trying to find the right place for speakers in your room.
That's so true.
Sorry.
So it said, since you have a generous 8.4 meter wall to work with, you have some great options to avoid that muddy, boomy bass. And I think that's a real key, is because I've got a big space, we're not having to worry about the sound getting bundled up in corners. And that's, again, comes back to the whole bass traps conversation before.
You know what's going to happen, though? We're going to publish this episode, and then the transcript will get made. The transcript will go public, and then an AI model is going to read the transcript, and it's going to ingest what we're talking about here, including the summary from Gemini, which is going to reinforce
the same thing.
Should we be agents of chaos and introduce some junk that will potentially muddy up the model weighting here and say?
I think it would take more than one small drop of chaos to do that, but we could try.
Oh, but but our clout's pretty. No, you're right. Yeah. So keep going.
So it said in a room of this size, and so here's a key. This may not be transferable to all rooms because not everybody's going to have a room for their speakers that is the size of this. My room, by the way, is 8.4 meters by 5.7 meters. So it's a big space.
No, Lachlan. It is a generous 8.4 meters.
That's true. So it says in a room of this size, you generally want to follow the rule of thirds or the rule of fifths to minimize standing waves. So the idea is you don't want any even distances to the walls, I think is what it's trying to say.
Sure, but you want to follow the rule of thirds or the rule of fifths.
Which one?
Why is it one or the other? Do we know why that is?
Let me continue. So Gemini then says the starting recommendation, 1.68 meters. For a room that is 8.4 meters long, placing your speakers 1.68 meters from the front wall, the 8.4 meter wall they're against, that's very confusing, but it's saying that what it's suggesting is that for the long wall, which is 8.4 meters long, I want to move them 1.6 meters away from that wall. And I was placing the speakers in the center, as in not both together in the center, but with a bit of distance between them in the center of that 8.4 meter wall. So it says this is a fantastic starting point. It represents 1/5 of the room's length. And why this works is that placing speakers away from the wall reduces speaker boundary interference response, which is the negative version of that boundary reinforcement thing I spoke about before. And if they're too close to the wall, the low frequency waves reflect off the wall and cancel out the sound coming forward, which is what we spoke about before. The rule of thirds would bring them 2.8 meters out into the room, which is considered audiophile standard, incredible depth, but it takes up a lot of space. And it's not a usable distance for me. And then on the flip side, it says to put them near the wall, in which case you need to be less than 50 centimeters from the wall. And in my experience, you need to get them as close to the wall as possible. I literally had the the bases of the speaker stands touching the bottom of the wall, and then I had the stands were angled to create some toe in, but the bottom corners of the stands were right against the wall, because otherwise every time you come out at all from the wall, you're going to create some disruptive reflections. So that was Google's thinking, was 1/5 of the way, and it looks like, so 1.68 would be 1/5 of 8.64, which is curious.
Yeah.
It's bringing me 1/5 of the distance from the long wall, which I would have thought wasn't the relevant number. I would have thought what mattered was actually the short wall, the distance between the speaker and the back wall and the speaker and the front wall would have been more important than the width of the space. It's very strange.
But you need there's two numbers, right? Because you need to know how far are you out from the wall behind the speaker, and you need to know how far are you out from the sides, right? Like, I mean, like you essentially need an X and a Y coordinate. You don't you? And you have two speakers, right? We're talking about stereo, left and right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've just opened a can of worms here because I just literally all I did was I asked the question, I ignored everything it wrote, and I looked for a number which was 1.68 meters. I went, yep, that's good. That's good. I'm going with that, because I thought I'd asked the right question. But what I'm looking at now is that I don't know that 1.68 is necessarily the perfect position, because the depth of that space is 5.7 meters. And so I've come 1.68 meters forward into a 5.7 meter room.
You need to go to Bunnings or a Lowe's or whatever, or a Home Depot, and get those little moving dollies that have got like the rollerblade wheels on them, on bearings. And then you need to put your speaker stands on one, and then you need to have Xander or something, like you need to pay him 50 cents an hour to like just slowly move them in a very, draw a grid on the ground, and then have him sort of move them in different places and see how it changes.
Yeah, because I've just done some maths here, and it really hurt. But but the one, if we work on the rule of 1/5 for a moment, the space. Let me set this up properly, because people can only hear this; they can't see it. So the wall I'm facing when I'm listening is the one that is 8.4 meters long. It's a grey cement brick wall, cinder block wall, 8.4 meters long, and I'm essentially sitting the dead center point of that wall.
Right.
The distance between the wall in front of me and the wall behind me is 5.7 meters. I would have thought that was where we want to worry about the standing waves.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Not the lateral. And so if I was to do the 1/5 rule on the front to back as I'm sitting in my chair, then I should be 1.14 meters from the back wall, not 1.68 meters from the back wall.
Well, you're going to have to try all these different permutations.
Because I measured what's also tripped me up here. I didn't read what Google answered, so I didn't see the potential error in what it said. And here's another trick for the kiddies at home, is that you can't trust what comes out of Gemini and similar AI.
No, I won't have that. Lachlan, take that back. AI is flawless. It is the pinnacle of truth. Human evolution.
So I got tricked, because I just believed Google, and then when I measured, because I did do measurements to double check, when I measured the response of the speakers at 1.68 meters, it sounded great. Sorry, when I say sounded great, it looked great. The graph came up beautiful. It was very smooth and linear. It matched the response of the speakers as they should have been.
But did it also sound great? Subjectively sound great?
It sounds magnificent. So what I'm wondering now is, if I go to 1.14...
Try some of these other ratios and see how it goes.
1.14 might sound even better, which is very exciting. So I will try that.
See, love the gear you have.
Yes, exactly.
Just play around with room placement.
100%. 100%.
Well, so is there time between now and the next episode for... I mean, this feels like it's a priority for you. You're going to need to,
I'll be doing
try out some of these new ratios and see what sounds best.
Yep, I'll be testing this tomorrow. I'll go back down there. I've got a laser pointer, like a laser distance measure, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'll do that. I'll measure it at 1.14. I might also try, so if we use the rule of thirds, Then 5.7, I could also move them forwards to 1.9, which might be getting a bit too far forwards into the room for the space I have, but I'll try it and see. And so we'll see if the 1.14 or the 1.9 meters from the wall, if it makes much difference in how it sounds, and more importantly, how it measures, because it already sounds great, but if it measures better, then maybe there's some subtleties I'm not hearing yet. So I will try that, and I will report back in our next episode.
That's very exciting. And what sort of reference recordings or reference sort of tone profiles are you sort of using to measure?
I'm just using a full range frequency sweep from 20 to 20. So 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz using Room EQ Wizard. And I've got the Mini DSP UMic 1 reference measurement microphone is what I use for all my measurements, which is it's generally considered to be a good way of doing this sort of thing. So it gives me the frequency response. It also gives me what's called the RT60 scores. So I can see, and this is what I referenced before, I can see how long it takes for the kind of the echoes, reverberation, remnants of the sound to dissipate after they're there. And at the moment, from a technical point of view, it is too high. But I know that because I haven't treated the room yet. And so this is where the journey begins, and where we, you and I will probably revisit this as I'm able to do more. I'll come back and share what's happened, what's worked, what's not worked, what I've learnt. We'll discover the holes in what I've learnt, like we have today, where I've made decisions based on potentially incorrect information from Gemini. And again, if anyone's sitting listening to this and screaming at their whatever device they're using to play back the podcast that no,
Zoom.
Gemini was correct and I've got it wrong and it should be about the dimensions of the longest wall, not the shortest wall, then please let us know at askthegroovepod@gmail.com. But Nick, let's park it there because that was a lot.
Yes.
And talk new music. Have you got any quick new music suggestions?
Oh gosh, well no, that wasn't what I was prepared to open my mouth and talk about. I was going to share the quote that I found.
Open your mouth and talk about?
Well, we've covered it all now, but to me, so when you and I were quickly chatting before we started recording, what we're going to talk about in this episode, and you said I want to talk about speaker placement and room treatment, and I was like, that's fantastic. I haven't been playing with either of those things. However, I did find this fantastic thread on Reddit.
Oh yeah.
Which started for me as a little bit of clickbait, where it was someone posted in audio in our audio file. What's the difference between a $30,000 home entertainment system and a $150,000 one? And apart from the fact that it's like, well, probably have no kids and inherited wealth and living in a tax shelter. Someone jumped in and said like, hey, you're going to get a lot of jokes here, which I guess I just proved that point. But as a former mastering engineer and a person that currently does high-end AV and theater integrations, it's the room and the room treatment that is the biggest cost factor once you hit the point of diminishing returns in gear investment. Let me spend $15,000 on gear and $100,000 on the room. It'll sound better than $100,000 in gear and $15,000 in a $15,000 room. And so and I'll just jump forward to and this is from Neelix and Chill. I didn't even see the name. That's fantastic. And then they just sort of finished off by saying, honestly, on a normal budget, I'd focused almost entirely on the room before I worried about fancy gear. Start with basic placement, which we've just talked about. Don't jam speakers into corners, although we did sort of say maybe you might in certain scenarios.
Not corners, but
not corners. I'm sorry, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Don't jam speakers into corners. Don't sit dead center in the room. Then spend money on some simple acoustic treatment. Bass traps in the corners are the biggest bang for buck. Then a few absorption panels at the first reflection points on the side walls and maybe the ceiling. That alone fixes 80% of what people think of as the speaker problem. And then it says, a hill I'll die on. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I want to quote them correctly. And yeah, I'll die on this hill. Cheap speakers in a well-treated room will smoke ultra high-end speakers in a bare room every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Expensive gear doesn't beat physics. It just exposes bad rooms faster.
Yep, I would.
Now you probably knew all that. But I didn't. Like I mean, I knew of the physics of sound, and I knew you need to take that into account, and I know about bass traps and all that kind of stuff. But to hear those sort of numbers and to hear that in such sort of plain language, really, it was like, wow, I'm going to go play with my speaker placement.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, I'm going to play with a couple of well-placed bass traps, or maybe I'll go and create one with a Billy bookcase and a couple of pillows and some old fabric.
Yeah. And I think I don't necessarily agree with the numbers used in that post about the $15,000 and $100,000 or $50,000, whatever it was. I think, and I'm guessing that was being said to create the impact, and it wasn't a hard and fast set of numbers that person was quoting. I think the point is correct, though, which is there's no point putting expensive gear in a cheaply or an untreated room or badly treated room because of all those reasons. And I don't want to dive too deep into this because I think we've already probably talked long enough on this episode.
Yep.
But I think we can definitely revisit it. The thing that stands out to me is how often I go to hi-fi shows, and anybody listening that's gone to hi-fi shows will have experienced this, where you'll walk into a room with an incredibly expensive hi-fi setup in a hotel room, and you listen to it and go, yeah, it's not great. I don't know what all the fuss is about. And it's because those rooms are hotel rooms. They're not treated.
Yeah.
The people that are often the speakers are too big for the room, and the fact that they have to set up a couple of rows of seats means they can't bring them far enough out into the room to get away from the walls far enough, and they're doing the best they can. They can't bring a whole lot of acoustic treatment into the room, so again, they do the best they can. But I've got a pair of speakers I'm actually editing the review for at the moment. They're a Malaysian speaker. They're compact two-way sealed box speaker. They're about $1,000 in my setup at the studio now, because I've got all that space around the speakers that they're a long way from any walls and I can sit in a really good sweet spot. They sound as good as anything I've heard up to $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 US at a hi-fi show, which is not to say that those other more expensive speakers wouldn't sound better in my room because of, again, the space around them. Again, the room's not treated yet, but it's all about just having the space around the speakers so they're not too close to walls. I've got a pair of Proax that I think retail for about $5,000 US. Those still sound better than the $1,000 Malaysian speakers, but the Malaysian speakers are so close because they're not being held back by the room. And so that's where I definitely agree with what's being said there. If I was to put a pair of expensive speakers in my office where I used to do all my filming, they would sound crap compared to what I'm hearing from these $1,000 Malaysian speakers in my studio where I've got a better setup for them now. So yeah, I think it's absolutely a great point.
Awesome. I would love to hear your music recommendation, and then cool. I'll save mine till next time.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So I've just, for some reason, I've ended up with a whole lot of Jon Batiste albums in my what I call my discovery playlist. So Jon Batiste he was for many years the music director, whatever they call them, on the Late Show, I think it's called, with Stephen Colbert, whatever Stephen Colbert's show was called.
Yep, that's right.
He's very kind of eccentric, extroverted, outgoing guy. Plays piano as his primary instrument on the Late Show anyway, but he's a multi-instrumentalist apparently. His album called, I think it's Big Money, is a recent album of his. It is so much fun. He explores multiple different sounds. A lot of it's kind of got a bit of a Louisiana jazz undertone to it. There's one track in particular that I can't get enough of because it's got a very 50s rock, like early 50s rock and roll feel. You can imagine like almost a Buddy Holly type vibe to it, but very modernized. And again, with his jazz sensibilities kind of filtering in as well. It's a beautifully recorded album. There's a track on there called Petrichor, which was one of the tracks I used to test my speakers, funnily enough, when I was setting them up, because it's got this, it sounds like somebody playing timbres or a similar instrument with their hands on drum skins, and you can hear all this texture coming from it, which is awesome. But it's just an album I can put on and just enjoy because it's a bit of a musical journey. It's got multiple different musical influences in it, lots and lots of fun. So that'd be my recommendation, is to check out Big Money by Jon Batiste as my current go-to favourite.
That is a great place to end it. I'm going to go listen to Jon Batiste Big Money while I cook some dinner.
I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Locke. Thank you, listeners. It's good to be back.
Yeah, likewise. And we are trying. Nick and I have got a fortnightly placeholder in our calendars, which means we'll probably record an episode once every second or third month, I'm guessing.
On odd years.
That's right, yeah. But we're working on it. We're trying to get there.
Awesome.
All right, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Stay in the groove.